Well, hello everybody, and welcome to week 7. Can you believe we are already halfway through this course? I'm very excited about that. I'm sure y'all are too, but it's been so fun getting to know each one of you, and I look forward to the rest of the semester also. So we're going to go ahead and just jump right into kind of our recap from week 6, and we're talking about feelings, observations, reflecting feelings, emotions, all those fun sorts of things. And I'm going to be real honest, this is one of my favorite topics, which if you would have asked me, 5, 6, 10 years ago, if I would enjoy talking about emotions, my answer would have been a resounding no. I did not understand, did not like, and probably did not even, or thought I didn't feel emotions. But as I have, especially during my journey in licensure, I have kind of come to a new awakening about emotions and how they pertain to us as individuals, as well as how that can definitely aid and really drives the therapeutic process also. So, we are going to start off by doing an actual exercise, and this is something that I would do with my clients. And so, what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to speak slowly here so y'all can have time to grab supplies. I would like for you to grab either like a pen and paper, or you can maybe pull up a screen on your computer and like a Word document or a Pages document, or maybe you can type it into your phone. So I'm going to do, while you're gathering stuff, I'll just explain this. I'm just going to give you 30 seconds. I'll watch on my clock up here. Maybe 30 seconds, and in those 30 seconds, what I want you to do is I want you to identify as many emotions as you possibly can, okay? So 30 seconds is what I'm going to give you. Identify and write down as many emotions as you possibly can, and then we'll continue from there. So I'm going to give you those 30 seconds in 3, 2, 1, go. 10 seconds left. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, pens down, pencils down, phones closed, whatnot. All right, so I want you to just briefly count up how many emotions you actually listed. And I know I can't see all your lists, but I would guess that most of you probably came up with somewhere in the range of 7 to 12 different emotions. Happy, sad, scared, mad, angry, joyful, something along those sorts of lines. But I would guess it's probably around 7 to 10 or so, which is about average. That's, when I do this activity with clients, that's about what they get too. And the reason that I'm having you do this activity is because I really want to help you guys understand that our range of vocabulary when we speak about emotions and as we seek to understand emotions is fairly limited. A lot of us have messages that we carry on a very deep level about emotions, expressing emotions, what feeling means to us, what does that say about us as a person. For those of us who've grown up in the church, especially those of us who grew up in a stoic northern culture, which I am included in that also, emotions are not something that are necessarily looked on highly, and definitely not something that people spend a lot of time talking about or seeking to understand. And in fact, I know for myself, the majority of the messages that I received about emotions were fairly negative, maybe not intentionally, but I received a lot of what I would consider to be negative messages trying to kind of dampen or push down emotions. And to that degree, I would just kind of invite you to think about what are the messages that you were told as a child by your parents about feeling, about emotions. I would imagine for many of you, if y'all got angry when your parents were around, what did they do? They probably sent you to your room where you got a spanking, and they said, don't come out of here until you're done being angry. Okay? Or they would tell you, this isn't something to get angry about. Or stop crying. You don't need to be sad about this. And so I don't think our parents were necessarily malicious in speaking to us that way about emotions, but I think what we carry is a very strong message that emotions are bad, they're scary, that they're punishable. I was a very rambunctious little kid. I was very sassy. I got in trouble a lot. I was very passionate, and in that passion, oftentimes I got very heated and very angry because I was trying to get my point across. And as a kid, I did not know how to regulate myself. So I was kind of angry. But I know that I received a very, very strong message that you should not be angry. Angry is not a good and godly emotion. And so I really carried that with me for the rest of my life. I think that was enforced or reinforced by other outlets, maybe by my parents down the road, by churches, by youth leaders, by mentors, by employers, all of those sorts of things. But in general, we're taught that emotions are not necessarily a favorable thing to experience. And oftentimes as kids, we're actually punished for expressing our emotion. But I think what's really important to understand, and what I really want to invite you guys into a knowledge of, especially as you grow personally and professionally and start seeing clients, is that emotions are actually very healthy, very natural, and very much a driving force of why we do what we do. Not as counselors, but in the way that we act as human beings, it's driven from our emotions and how we're feeling. And I think what's so important is to recognize that our emotions are part of the way that we were created by God. And I think it's never said enough that our emotional makeup is very important to who God created us to be. I can only speak from my own experience, but I know that in my world, in my culture that I grew up in, the mind was elevated over the emotions, very much so. Verses were kind of spewed out, the heart is deceitful, do not trust it, taken out of context, and basically led me to believe for a long time that I couldn't trust my emotions. In fact, that my emotions were bad and I needed to do anything that I could to really kind of repress them and squelch them because they were deceitful. And deceit is a sin. So emotions equaled sin, right? In my mind, that's how I thought. And so I spent many years resisting emotion and believing that that was actually ungodly. And I would guess that there's many of you who might have similar stories. But interestingly enough, emotions are a very, very beautiful part of who God created us to be. And if we look at Jesus' own example, Jesus experienced emotion. What happened when Lazarus died? Jesus was sad. He wept. What happened when he walked into the temple and he started flipping over the tables because of what the money exchangers were doing and how they were violating the temple? He was angry and he acted on that anger. And so we see that Jesus, the perfect human being, experienced intense emotion. He experienced intense anguish and sorrow and despair when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. He experienced emotional and physical pain when he was being crucified. Jesus experienced emotions. And so surely if he can experience them, we can too. We're built for that. Jesus was fully human, as are we. And so it's important to recognize that emotions are actually something that we are created with. And emotions really are the core of who we are. This is what drives us. This is something that's present from the moment that we're born. If you think about it as a newborn baby, the only thing you can do really is express emotion. Sadness, terror, fear, happiness. You don't have words to express it. You can only express it by nonverbal cues. You don't have knowledge saying that this is good or this is bad to feel this way. It's just this unadulterated, innocent emotion. And we feel it. It's present from the time that we are born into this world. And so I think what it's really important to recognize then is that, we weren't born with knowledge, but we were born with emotions. We were born with the capacity to have knowledge. We weren't necessarily born with it. These are things, we learn things as we grow up, but we were born with emotions. So that means that's a really important part of who we are. And it's okay to acknowledge that. At the beginning of this semester, one of the resources that I mentioned to y'all was a book called Voice of the Heart by a guy named Chip Dodd. This has been a very influential book in my life. It's something that has really kind of called me back to allowing myself to express emotion, talk about it, feel things, and really been quite healing in many ways. So if y'all haven't had a chance to look at that book, maybe look it up on Amazon, grab a copy of it, Voice of the Heart by Chip Dodd. But what he talks about in his book is what he calls core emotions. And Chip Dodd identifies 8 core emotions. Now, I know there's arguments that there's 7 emotions, or there's 52 emotions, or 8, and I'm not really going to get hung up so much on the number of emotions, but what I love about Dr. Dodd's concept is that he has identified 8 different emotions. We've got anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, shame, and gladness. Those are our 8 emotions. And he identifies those, and in his book talks about what is that true emotion, what is anger truly. But what he goes into on a deeper level is that in each of our emotions, there's the true emotion, and then there's an impairment of that emotion and a gift out of that emotion. So when he talks about anger, essentially, okay, so he would say anger is the emotion that we feel when something that is important to us, or that is a passion of ours, could be a family, friends, a thing, an activity, something that's important to us, kind of gets rubbed up against and kind of is threatened in a sense. So something that's important to us, somebody comes in and says that's not important, or they violate that, or they do something to suggest that that thing that's important to you is not so important to them. And that's the emotion that comes out. That's when anger comes out, because we go, oh no, you didn't. Like, that is important to me. And that we would feel that sense of anger. We feel anger over the things that are important to us, over the things that we're most passionate about. And you think about it, anger is even the emotion that we feel when something is so important to us that we're willing to die for it. Isn't that what Jesus did? He was so angry at the state of the world, as evidenced by what was happening in the temple, that his passion arose out of that, his passion for love, for humanity, for grace, and he was willing to die for the things that he was passionate about. So out of the emotion of anger comes the gift of passion. It's so beautiful. But on the flip side, if we experience anger and we're not really willing to dig into that, to sit in that, to process through it, what it turns into is depression, which is essentially anger turned inwards. It's not necessarily the type of depression where you can't get out of bed in the morning, or you gain or you lose a lot of weight. It's that anger turned inwards where I just don't care anymore. Nothing's important. It just is whatever. And that's a form of depression. And that comes from anger. So you see, we've got this true emotion and then a gift out of that and an impairment of that. And so Dr. Dodd goes through and he talks about the different emotions and impairments and gifts. And what I'm going to do at the end of this, we'll talk when we go into our resources section, is I will again visit this, and I will make sure to send you guys a document that I've created, kind of just a chart of the true emotions, the passions, and the impairments, just for your own point of reference. So that's kind of the emotions spiel and why it's so important. And we'll pause right here and then go into another video talking about emotion a little bit further.